Have you ever gone into Azure, tried creating a virtual machine, and suddenly saw weird names like E8 ADSV5, D2SV3, or B2MS, or even NC4ES underscore V3, and wondered, what does this even mean? How do people choose the correct VM size, and why are there so many different VM types? Honestly, earlier even I did not fully understand these names. I used to simply choose VMs based on RAM, CPU, and their price, but I never understood why some are optimized for memory, why some are cheaper, why some support GPUs, and why choosing the wrong SKU can completely affect the performance and cost. And I'm pretty sure many people in Azure still do not fully understand this. So in this video, we are going to properly decode Azure VM naming conventions. By the end of this video, when you see something like E8 ADSV5 or any other SKU size, you will instantly understand what every part means. So let's start. Before decoding the names, first understand why this matters, because this is not just about memorizing your VM names. This directly affects your performance, cost, architecture design, your scaling, networking, and even your licensing costs. For example, if you deploy a database workload on the wrong VM family or productions workloads on burstable SKU, you may face slowness, bottlenecks, unstable performance, or massive unnecessary Azure bills. And many organizations overspend in Azure simply because they do not understand VM sizing properly. So learning the VM SKUs is actually a very important cloud architecture skill. This is the difference between someone who simply deploys a VM and someone who actually designs cloud infrastructure properly. So let's take an example when you have over provisioned your VM. So suppose you have deployed a E16S V5, which is basically your 16 vCPUs, and actually your VM requires just a 4 CPU. So if you check, the monthly cost will be a lot because you have 16 vCPU, and if you check the resource utilization, you can see that it's just used 10 to 20% and idle is 80%. So deploying this much of resource for workload that needs fraction of performance over what we have already deployed. If we scale the virtual machine down to a D4AS V5, which is your first CPU, you'll get a lot of less cost, but you are already paying. Similarly, if you check the under provisioning of your resources, so sometimes your applications or databases can require more compute or more memory compared to the CPU. So in this case, you would have to choose the appropriate SKU to handle the workload. Now let us decode this virtual machine name. So you see E8 ADSV5. So at first glance it looks complicated, but once you break it down, it becomes very easy. Every Azure VM size or SKU is made up of different components. That is your VM family that determines here E, the first character. Next is the CPU count, how much CPU is going to be there for your virtual machine. So in this case, we will have the 8 CPUs. Then we have is a special feature letters. We will see more on next section, like what does A stand for and S. And then D stands for the storage, like temporary disk. If you want for your virtual machine to be present, you would have to choose the D. And V5 determines your hardware generations. So in the data center, what kind of hardware your virtual machine SKU is utilizing. So higher the number of the generation, the more performant it's going to be. Like for the CPU, will be able to handle faster processing, better efficiency, and multi-thread performance. In terms of memory, you'll get the faster RAM, better memory bandwidth, lower latency, right? And also the good networking and disk IOPS performance. Once you understand these pieces, you can understand almost any Azure VM SKU. And now let's understand the family of the SKUs which Azure provides. The first letter usually tells you the VM family. In this case, E is the VM family. Similarly, we have other SKU like F and D. So E series is memory optimized, meaning you'll get more memory compared to the CPU. And these VMs are designed for workloads needing large RAM. Example, your SQL Server, SAP, Redis, analytics workloads, and your large databases. Next we have is B series. B series VMs are burstable VMs. These are cheaper VMs designed for workloads that stay idle most of the time, but occasionally need CPU burst. So the resources are not utilized very heavily and are low on CPU usage. You can go with B series, and these are recommended only for dev testing environment. And these are very good for dev test, domain controllers, small websites, low traffic applications, but not ideal for heavy production workloads. And in the middle we have is a D series. D series is most commonly used in Azure VM families. That is, it has the balanced CPU and memory, perfect for web application, your enterprise app, backend servers, Kubernetes nodes, and medium workloads. Next we have is a F series. F series are compute optimized, so it will provide more CPU compared to the memory. So it's good for gaming servers, your rendering, analytics, CPU intensive workloads. Wherever the workloads utilize very high CPU, F series can be used. So next we have is M series, and that is you get a massive RAM. So in terms of CPU, just for 64 CPU you'll get a 512 of gigabytes memory and used for huge SAP workloads, your enterprise databases and in-memory application. And next we have is an L series. L series is your storage optimized. You'll get high disk throughput and IOPS, and it's best for wherever your large chunk of data is going to get stored in disk. Best for NoSQL databases, data warehouses, big data workload, and heavy storage applications. And N series is for GPU optimized. And as you would already know, GPU is in very high demand. It's used for AI, machine learning, your graphics rendering, and simulations. This family is becoming extremely popular because of AI workloads. And next, the small letters. These letters tell us the special VM features. Like in case of A stands for AMD. So Azure offers both Intel and AMD. AMD VMs are often slightly cheaper. So if your workloads does not specifically require Intel, AMD can help reduce Azure cost. And if you want Intel one, you just have to not use A on your VM size. And S basically means the premium SSD support. So if your workloads just require the standard SSD disk, you don't have to include the S, and you will get the standard SSD and HDD, but not the premium SSD. But if your workloads require the premium SSD disk, you would have to use the S also in your VM size. So in case if you don't want the AMD processor and premium SSD disk support, you can just directly choose E8 V5. But in case if you want these features, you would have to use the E8 ASV5. And next we have is a D. D means VM includes local temporary storage. This storage is very fast but not persistent, meaning if the VM is stopped, redeployed or moved, the data may be lost. So you should never store databases, backups, important application data. Good use case will be your temporary files, cache, swap space. And my experience, I've seen many engineers often putting the data in the temporary storage, and that data can be deleted whenever the machine is stopped. Also, oftentimes disk is just attached without any use case, just costing you money. And if you don't require, you can change the VM size to not include the temporary disk, and you can save cost. Next we have is a hardware version. So V5 indicates hardware generation version. Usually higher version means your better CPUs, networking, better efficiency, and improved performance. Sometimes newer generation are even cheaper, so always compare the hardware version V3, V4, V5, V6 before selecting a VM. So now let us combine everything. E stands for your family, in this case memory optimized, then your 8 vCPUs, your AMD processor, and D for local temporary disk and premium SSD support. And P5 is your fifth generation hardware. And now you would have more idea what each character stands for. And this is exactly how Azure Architect thinks while selecting the VMs. Now the big question, how you should choose Azure VM sizes. And for this you would have to ask yourself these questions. If your workload is CPU heavy, you would have to choose the F series. If your workloads are memory heavy, choose the E series or the M series. If your workload is very storage intensive, you can choose the L series, which have more throughput and IOPS. Then we have is a storage intensive, or if your workload is AI or machine learning intensive, you can go for N series, which is dedicated for machine learning and AI. And if you just need a cheap dev test for your workload, you can go for B series. And for general enterprises application, you can go for D series because it is the most commonly used and has balance of CPU and RAM and good performance as well. So this is how you can think of when you are choosing Azure VM size. Another thing many beginners forget, even if the VM is powerful, slow storage can bottleneck everything. So VM selection and disk selection must always be planned together. Like in this case example, we have selected the VM size that is F8S V2, which has very good IOPS and throughput. But if you are just using standard HDD or SSD disk, your performance would be not good and cause issues even if your VM is powerful. You would have to select the premium disk also, which matches with your VM size. So let us talk about saving money. So to save cost, you can start with right size your VM. Do not over provision. Many companies waste money using oversized VMs. Use AMD when possible. AMD VMs are often cheaper than Intel, and use spot VMs, great for testing, automation, batch jobs, very cheap, but Azure can evict them anytime. So if you have workloads running on spot and you get a lot of discount, if Azure decides to use that queue and take it back, your workloads will be affected. Then other thing you can go is for reserved instances. That is perfect if you know your workloads are going to be there for a longer time. For that, you can use reserved instances that can significantly reduce your monthly cost. And also you can look upon the option like auto shutdown, especially important for dev test environment, because if your engineers are not using servers off hours or out of their shift, you can turn off the VMs and you will save the compute cost. And sometimes you have deployment guardrails. So there are some quota limits that you would have to ask from Microsoft if you are not able to deploy any VM size. So Azure often have some hard limits set upon the subscription for some SKUs that you can raise a case with Microsoft and ask them to remove the hard limits for the VM creation. And also there is region availability. Not all Azure VM SKUs exist in every region. So you would have to check if the SKU which you want to deploy is available at your region, and also your Gen port. So modern SKUs require Gen 2 VM architecture. So you would have to include that also while choosing your SKUs. Now let me quickly show you how you would check the cost in Azure. So you can check that in the Azure pricing calculator page. And in here I'll select a virtual machine. And in the virtual machine, I'll select a region, suppose Central US, and I'm deploying operating system Windows. In this case, I'll show you the cost for B series with development and testing, B4 ASP2. So you can see the cost is 124 per month. And if I reserve this for 3 years, the cost will be $41, right? And similarly, if I go for D series, ADSV5, and this is we have AMD, your temporary storage and premium SSD disk support. In this I'm getting 150 gigabytes of storage. Similarly, I can see the cost with 3-year reservation is 57, and if I change the region from 57, the pricing will change to 68, right? So cost depend upon the region also. And similarly, if I change to D4 V5, so in this case, Intel processor, and if I go to manage disk, I won't see the premium SSD support because I haven't selected the S here. So if I select the D4SV5, I'll see the premium SSD, right? So this is how you can calculate the cost and get the estimation. Also, I've covered video on how to use pricing calculator, which you can see on the top. And in that, I've clearly explained how you can use the pricing calculator to check the cost of your Azure services. So do check that out for the cost estimation and how to use the pricing calculator. Now, when you see VM names like E8 ADS V5, you'll no longer feel confused. You can actually understand workload purpose, your architecture fit, your storage implications and cost considerations. And honestly, understanding VM SKUs is one of those Azure skills that separates someone who simply deploys resources from someone who truly designs cloud infrastructure properly. If this video helped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let me know in the comments which Azure topic should I explain next. And I'll see you in the next video.